All right, you're watching Live Now. I'm Austin Westfall. Live look at the White House approaching 8:30 in the nation's capital. As I mentioned before the break, you can't discuss today's Epstein bill without discussing the DOJ. After all, the files that everybody's focusing on are case files from the Department of Justice. They're being held at the DOJ, and Kaelan Deese is a Justice Department reporter for the Washington Examiner. He's here. Kaelan, once President Trump signs the bill, we don't exactly know the timing of when that's going to happen, but once the bill is signed, which we expect he will sign it, does that trigger the release of the files immediately? What's the timeline after the president signs this thing into law?
Well, that is something that I think is one of the biggest questions out of all of this is what is the actual end result once Trump's pen is flicked on the page? What happens from the DOJ side? That is something that I think we're going to get more insight from once Trump actually signs the bill, because so far it hasn't been too much information from the DOJ side. When you reach out to the White House, they recommend you to, reach out to them. But so far, the DOJ is just not really saying too much. The one thing that's interesting is, perhaps this could be a situation where they've already gotten some of the files sort of lined up for some kind of release. There could also be a situation in which the DOJ, which they have been doing already, is handing over some of the documents to congressional committees, namely the House Committee on Oversight has been handling the investigation. So we could perhaps see the files doled out that way, or it could be situationally, it could be something like what we've seen with the JFK files releases, and also things like the more recent talked about Amelia Earhart files. Something on like a computer database that could be all put together nicely. Although I wouldn't really put that expectation high up there, because what we saw with the Epstein estate files from the House Oversight Committee was just one PDF image after another PDF image, and it was really hard to search through those things. But assuming that the DOJ is going to be putting together something on this, you would hope that they would be easily searchable. That's just something that we haven't really been guaranteed in this whole process yet about all these files releases.
For anybody who's wondering about what President Trump is saying in reaction to the bill being passed by Congress tonight, he has sent out a Truth Social. He says, "I don't care when the Senate passes the House bill, whether tonight or at some other time in the near future. I just don't want Republicans to take their eyes off of all the victories that we've had, including the great big beautiful bill, closed borders, no men and women's sports or transgender for everyone, ending DEI, stopping Biden's record-setting inflation, biggest tax and regulation cuts in history, stopping 8 wars, rebuilding our military, being respected by every country in the world, having trillions of dollars invested in the United States, having created the hottest country anywhere in the world, and even delivering a huge defeat to the Democrats on the shutdown. Make America great again." So not providing a whole lot of clarity as to when exactly we'll see this thing signed by the president. What I can ask about tonight, though, and I think something that a lot of people are curious about, I was reading a lot of commentary online, Kaelan, about the files. Some people are concerned that the files will in some way be altered in order to protect possible high-profile names. Is something like that possible? And what do we know about what may or may not be redacted?
Well, the really interesting thing about this is that the DOJ does have some. They have complete, decision making in this process to essentially say we're going to redact certain things because they are the end all be all when it comes to these protections. So they could make the argument that some of the redactions maybe are because there's pending litigation. They could make an argument that there's, victims who have lawsuits or something to that effect, that, maybe that's why we can't show this portion of this document or that portion of that document. The problem is that there is likely going to be missing information once we see any kind of files released from the DOJ, and that's going to prompt more questions from the public. But the DOJ does have many a reason to decide that they're going to withhold something. And that's going to be the most frustrating element out of all of this, is because even though the bill is saying that Trump has to essentially release everything, the Trump administration must release everything, that doesn't necessarily mean that the DOJ is always compliant with this kind of thing. I think that the most recent analog that we've seen where we didn't see complete compliance, at least in the beginning, was whenever the Trump administration came in right out of the get-go with the TikTok bill, and there wasn't that immediate divestment that the bill's text sort of required. There was those delays of implementation of that until finally we saw recently there was actually a deal that came into place with ByteDance over the sale of TikTok. But that was something that was kind of skirting the boundaries and things of such. And with a bill like this that is essentially telling the commander in chief that you have to release all these informations from your DOJ. Eventually, the DOJ is going to have to just say there's certain things that we can't release here because they could implicate any ongoing litigation, and it could potentially be privileged information pertaining to defendants or even litigants who are trying to get money related to a lawsuit involving Epstein. So that's the real problem. We're in the dark about the volume of information, and we're in the dark about what could potentially be redacted. But we will know, based off of the information that's given to us, we will be able to see, what percentage is going to be redacted, and that will be very interesting to see. Is out of X number of documents, how many of these pages have black markings on them, or how many of them are completely black? I think that will be something that a lot of people will be talking about online, surely, if we see those redacted markings.
What's the likelihood that the information in these files will actually satisfy the appetite of people who are calling for this release?
Not likely at all, because I mean that's the thing, is that with a certain percentage of these files likely having to be withheld just for legal reasons, that is going to continue the questions coming out. And I think that when you look at the information that we saw pour out from the estate of Jeffrey Epstein last week, I think you really sort of cracked into the nut about what Trump was talking about many months ago when he was interviewed and asked about the Epstein files and whether he would release them during a Fox News interview. And again, I've said it again on this show, but Trump has raised the alarms about how there could be information that's just flat out false about some of the things about people in it. In his own situation, in his own sort of media cycle over the last few days, there's been this cleanup that Mark Epstein has had to come out and say that this conversation that was mentioned between Epstein and an email chain referencing a Bubba isn't actually Bill Clinton. I mean, I think everyone's sort of heard about this intimate rumor about Bill Clinton and Trump that just turned out to be completely, red herring, and it wasn't even real. So I think that that's the problem, is that people will get things that are out of context, things that don't fit into the overall narrative, but stand out and are significant, and they'll get elevated online in social media discourse. And then you'll start getting all these rumors that people will be, putting out there to leverage for clicks and things like that. So it's definitely a Pandora's box moment. In 2024, we saw Trump versus United States with his criminal court cases. Right now, it's almost Donald Trump versus the imagination of 364 million Americans, with all of the different things that we're seeing flying out of the gate about Epstein. So I don't think it's going to satisfy people's appetites for more information. I think it's only going to lead to more questions.
Well, with that in mind, is the DOJ the absolute final place that any new information about this case can be released? Once these files are released, is there any more information hidden, tucked away anywhere else?
I mean, I think there's always going to be more information, coming out the gates, more, potentially, people coming forward with records or things of the like from Epstein. I think that when you're talking about someone who's become as, his mythos and almost like, the idea of Epstein is bigger than the actual person himself, I think that you'll always come across maybe new artifacts that, involve the disgraced financier and some of his more salacious activities. And potentially, you have, at some point down the line, maybe more witnesses or victims feel emboldened to come out. Maybe some of the names of high-profile individuals, if they're named in some of these documents, will sort of stir the pot and create new, questions about some of those people. So there is always the opportunity that things outside of the federal government can, draw or shed a light. I think that that's something that the Epstein files really from the estate really showed us. I think it really enlightened us as to how much a figure like Steve Bannon was conversing with Epstein, although we knew that already. But just a number of figures that we knew had already spoken with Epstein or were connected to Epstein, we got a deeper sense about what those connections were like. So I think that with any kind of release from the federal government, you're definitely going to get a bunch of new questions that come with some of the references. But I must stress that, whatever you see, don't take it at first glance, because there might be additional context or context that's missing that could, create some more of these types of rumors that we've seen over the past couple days.
There's this question that I would love to ask a guy like you, a guy that tracks the DOJ so closely. Is there a common train of thought as to why these files aren't likely going to see the light of day until now, even though there's been so much public pressure leading up to this?
Well, until now, there wasn't that real push coming, I think, from a bipartisan standpoint. I think that under former President Joe Biden, there really wasn't this push coming from any side other than from a more conservative Trump base like side. So once you start to see, a Trump presidency that's making promises about releasing files that nobody's really even asked about, except for maybe a few, some of Trump's fringe followers, then you start to see a situation where maybe Democrats think that they can capitalize on it once they start to realize that there's things, involving Trump and Epstein out there, and they can maybe seize upon a what some might describe as an unforced error by Donald Trump, given how much, in the early days, Trump had some connections to Epstein. One might wonder, why would he want to, put himself out there? And I think if you ask Trump today, he probably would say, yeah, why did I make that promise to people? But I think that at the end of the day, the fact that Trump, wanted to come out and say, I'm going to sign this, it left people feeling a little bit, puzzled, because the president, at the end of the day, has the authority to release all this. This bill was unnecessary if Trump wanted to, just do it on his own. So the fact that it took this act from the House and act from the Senate to get this bill to his desk, I think is almost, puzzling people, because they're asking, why didn't Trump, who was campaigning on transparency and files releases, just wind up doing this? Why did we go through the whole session in July where the DOJ said it's going to close its inquiry, and now we have Pam Bondi saying that she's directing the Southern District of New York to open a new investigation into, alleged ties between Democrats like, the former President Bill Clinton and others into Epstein. Why did it take all this to get up to here? And I think that, you ask someone like me, I think it was just a series of unforced errors, but also the appetite by Trump to live up to his campaign promises, some of them that might have just been too bold and too, risky to even really make. But, ultimately, here we are.
Kaelan Deese covers the Department of Justice for the Washington Examiner. Thanks.
Thank you.